Hi, welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. And on this podcast, we're going to continue to look at the long run average total cost curve. And on a previous video, we said that there can be a lot of short run average total cost curves, but the bottom of all of them will make up the long run average total cost curve. The bottom of them all will make up the long run average total cost curve. And so if we get rid of all of the short run average total cost curves, then our long run average total cost curve is going to look like this. Now just remember, so here's a long run average total cost curve, and the average total cost, when you increase production, average total costs are going to decline, hit a minimum, and then begin to rise. But just keep in mind that this long-run average total cost curve is made up of short-run average total cost curves. There's lots of short-run average total cost curves in here, and I'm going to get rid of these here in a second, but I just want you to see that they are there. This is made up of, this long-run average total cost curve is made up of all of these short-run average total cost curves, okay? But we don't want them there right now because it just kind of clutters things, so let's get rid of them. There are those short-run average total cost curves. They're all there, but we just want to focus right now on the long-run average total cost curve, the long-run average total cost curve. And we want to say what it looks like and why it looks the way it does. So the first thing we want to say is what it looks like is, in general, that long-run average total cost curve is going to slope down, hit some kind of minimum, and then begin to rise. And the part where it's sloping down is what we call economies of scale. Now, what does economies of scale mean? That just means that when you increase production, when quantity is rising for the firm, when they increase production, that actually causes a decrease in their long-run average total costs. Their average total costs are actually declining as a result of increasing production. Now, eventually, production reaches a point where that's no longer true, where the costs no longer decline, and you might hit a point where the cost kind of remains steady for a while. And so we would say during that part of the curve, when the company is increasing production, that causes the long-run average total cost curve to remain unchanged. That line up top, that just means to stay the same, to remain unchanged, to stay constant, okay? And that is called constant returns to scale. That's constant returns to scale. And then finally, if you hit a large enough level of production, then as you increase production, or as the firm increases production, then the long-run average total cost will actually begin to rise, and that will cause an increase in the long-run average total cost. And when that happens, we call that diseconomies of scale. Now, let's come down here to the bottom and talk about why. Let's talk about why this is the case. Sorry about that. Let's talk about why this is the case. So first of all, economies of scale. Why do economies of scale exist? Well, that's just this. Increased production causes long-run average total cost to decline. What's the reasoning behind that? The reasoning behind that is, or one of the reasonings behind this, is it allows for specialization. As you increase production, firms are able to engage in more specialization, and that is able to drive down costs. That's able to drive down costs. So imagine if I wanted to open up a car company and I was going to produce some very small number of cars per year. Let's be crazy about it. Let's say I'm going to produce one car per year. If I'm going to produce one car per year, my costs are going to be very, very high. And one of the reasons why my costs are going to be very, very high is because I might be I can't afford to hire a team of lawyers and accountants and engineers and all that kind of stuff if I'm only producing one car. So that just means that I'm going to be doing a lot of this stuff myself. So I might be the CEO of the company. I might be the accountant for the company. I might be the engineer for the company. I might be the marketer for the company. I'm a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And specialization allows me to escape that problem. Specialization allows me to just become really good at one thing, and therefore I become highly productive. And when you're more productive, that's going to drive down costs. And then I hire a lot of other people that are, very specialized, that are very good at one thing that they do. A lot of specialization. They're good at one thing they do. They become very, very productive at it, and that's going to, as a result, drive down costs. So that's what happens when you increase production. You can engage in more specialization organization, hire more specialists, and so forth. At some point, you reach the constant returns to scale, and the constant returns to scale, that's when you increase production and your long-run average total costs remain constant. But here's the last part that we need to explain, and that is the diseconomies of scale. The diseconomies of scale, that's when the increase in production actually causes long-run average total cost to rise, and the question is why. And I'm sorry, some of this is cut off over here. Let me just see if I can move it over. Sorry, it's going to move everything, but at least you'll be able to see it. So what this means is that, or what's happening here is you begin to run into coordination problems. You begin to run into coordination problems. When the firm gets really big and is producing at very, very high levels of production, then management becomes very, very costly. If the firm is very large, then there's a large number of people to manage, and we got to keep track of them all, which means we have to hire a lot of managers, and we have to have a lot of policies in place, and so on. And this all just becomes very costly. Imagining running a firm that is an international corporation that maybe employs 50,000 people, and all those people have to be managed, and we have to make sure they actually work when they show up at the office and so forth. And managing all of that becomes very, very costly. So at some level of production, coordinating all those workers, coordinating the corporate bureaucracy becomes expensive, and that begins to drive up costs, and that's known as diseconomies of scale. So in general, long-run average total cost curve comes down, hits a minimum, and then rises, and you have economies of scale, followed by constant returns to scale, followed by diseconomies of scale. Those are the general principles behind a long-run average total cost curve. Okay, this has been Mr. Hagan on another Econ podcast. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you on the next podcast.